Josh Sebastian Miller. He was a fairly shy and quiet child. He was not sociable at school, but he also did not have problems talking to people. He just did not like being around many people, and he loved animals in general. Since he was born with a family on his mother's side who were farmers. Most of Josh's time was spent on his grandparents' farm, learning how to take care of the animals, prepare food, clean them. And Josh wants, when he grows up, to have a quiet life as a farmer like his grandparents, or to study to be a veterinarian, zoologist, or something related to animals. At the age of 5, he began to like the urban legends of his town, myths, terrifying stories. He was fascinated by all of that, and his favorite one was called the Farm Eater, an enormous creature which came at night to eat the farm animals and satisfy its great and unstoppable hunger. His parents hated that story because of how scary it was for children, but Josh didn't care. He loved hearing that legend. One night he tried to sleep at his grandparents' and uncle's house. It was vacation season and he wanted to stay with them and learn more about the farm. But in his bed, looking at the ceiling, he was a little scared because he heard his grandparents say that they were going to leave traps for the wolves. Lately, they had noticed that they were missing some chickens, goats, and pigs, and apparently they were wolves, since they lived near the forest where all kinds of animals roam. Josh was afraid for the poor defenseless animals. He couldn't fall asleep until he heard the loud cry of the cows, not that far from the house. Josh got up quickly and went to his window, which gave a full view of the entire place. He was trying to see what was happening, but it was dark outside. His grandfather opened the door to the room to see if everything was okay with Josh. "Hey, bud, you heard that, right? Possibly it's the wolves, but don't worry, stay in bed. I'll go scare those wolves away," his grandfather told him, trying to calm a distraught Josh while caressing his head. "Be careful, Grandpa," Josh said as he looked at him worried, and his grandfather just nodded and closed the door to the room while he heard his footsteps leave and Josh looked out the window. He watched his grandfather walk away with the flashlight in hand and the pitchfork, followed by the dogs. He could see him approaching the cow pen thanks to the light of his flashlight, and Josh kept looking at the light to make sure his grandfather was okay. But after a few minutes, the flashlight had gone out, worrying Josh, and the light did not return. He couldn't see anything, and he wondered if his grandfather was okay. Josh quickly left the room and carefully went to the entrance of the house, seeing that his grandfather's gun was on the table. He took the gun and a flashlight and left the house and went to where his grandfather's light had gone out. Now Josh was just a child. He didn't think about how dangerous it was to go outside. The only thing on his mind was to go and help his grandfather like any other worried child would. Josh walked slowly, looking at the grass with his flashlight, trying to see where his grandfather or the dogs were. His little legs were shaking as he looked everywhere. "Grandpa? Zeus? Maggie? King?" he shouts, trying to get the attention of his grandfather or the dogs, without any success. Now this time, Josh started to get really scared, looking back in case something was chasing him, until his feet touched something furry. When he lowered the gaze with the flashlight, he saw the body of one of the Carpathian shepherd dogs with blood in its mouth and a mark on its stomach. The boy's eyes filled with terror. Tears soon appeared. "King?" he could only say while his voice broke and he felt his stomach get ill, until he heard a growl in front of him, and as he slowly raised the flashlight, he saw the worst thing a child could witness at such a young age. It was a huge creature, bigger than the cows on the farm. with 4 eyes shining brightly into his. Josh froze. His heart stopped when he saw that beneath the creature was the mutilated body of his grandfather. The stomach ripped open and the organs in the mouth of that monster in front of him. His body began to shake. He felt like vomiting. His flashlight and gun fell to the ground, and was looking into the creature's eyes. The creature stared at him, about to approach, but Josh reacted and let out the loudest scream his small little throat could give him. A scream of horror and fear, and he began to cry, causing the creature to move away from him, dismayed. The lights in the house turned on immediately, alerting the monster, who quickly left the place, fleeing into the forest. He left the child screaming and crying alone with the lifeless body of the grandfather and his pets. The news quickly spread through the town. Authorities arrived a few minutes later, closing the area and beginning an investigation. They tried to question Josh, but he was in a state of shock, unable to speak. He couldn't think of anything but that grotesque scene. And in the end, the authorities decided to close the case due to a wolf attack, even though the family and close friends knew that it was not the fault of the wolves. Wolves could not leave claw marks all over the body of cows or dogs. The marks were larger than those of a wolf. Josh's life changed drastically. His father had a fight with his uncles for not having the area safe. Josh's uncles said it was not his fault, that it was possibly the farm eater. Now Josh's parents took them for crazy for believing in such a silly story, that such a thing couldn't exist, and decided not to return to the farm again. His grandmother and mother went into a deep depression, especially the grandmother, who after a few weeks almost committed suicide by trying to hang herself. His mother began to go from being happy to being serious and sad, and she hardly spoke with Josh anymore. His father was the only one who could help him move forward and get him psychological help, and Josh was able to move forward, thanks to him. But it was obviously not like before. He began to be more reserved with everyone and was losing friends. As he grew up, he somewhat forgot that event, or rather he was able to live with the bitter memory. At 20 years old, he decided to become a hunter, knowing that the authorities will not do anything about the incident. That sadness and terror within inside Josh turned into hatred. He wanted revenge for his grandfather. He tried to talk to his parents a long time ago about what he saw, but obviously, they told him that it was not real, that the trauma generated him a false scenario. But Josh knew that wasn't the case. He saw it with his own eyes. A monster who took the lives of half the farm and his grandfather. And no one could do anything. And so, he would do it by his own hand, even if he died trying. He did everything he could to learn how to hunt, to use a gun, get his license, and learn deeply about the forest, take the necessary exams, and he took a part-time job to pay all the expenses, until he was finally able to obtain a license. For a period of time, Josh was with a professional to learn how to hunt, starting with the basics. And he was serious about it, not only to look for that creature, but to have a job. He still loves animals, but he no longer had the same goals that he had as a child. His teacher was one of the best hunters in the area, with a lot of experience, Mr. Daniel Alexander Hernandez, or as almost everybody knows him, Great Dan. Living with him, maintaining a professional relationship with him, he tries to improve as a person. And one night they went camping and learned about wild animals. They had a calm conversation, talking about life experiences, until Big Dan asked Josh why he became a hunter if he loved animals so much. Now you answer honestly, boy. Why do you want to be a hunter? You're quite good with animals, you know a lot about biology and things of that nature. You could be a veterinarian or you could study sciences. Why take this path, huh? Dan asked the young man in front of him, while there was a campfire in the middle, and skewers with beef were cooking. Josh looked at the fire for a few seconds, remembering that incident, not knowing whether to answer that question, but he knew he couldn't lie, so he took a fistful of air into his lungs before answering. Well, I'll be honest with you, Mr. Dan. Whether you believe me or not, that's your problem. Josh began to speak while looking at the fire and Dan looking at him carefully. I was a child. My mother's side of the family were farmers, so I lived for a while in that environment. I was happy there with my grandparents and uncles. I admired my grandfather. He was a strong and brave man, and when I grew up I wanted to be a farmer like him. Or maybe a veterinarian. I do love animals. It was my dream. Josh began to speak in a melancholic tone of voice, moving his beef skewer on the fire before taking it out. So since you were a child, you were very into animals. But something happened, right? I mean, surely with your grandfather. There's a reason you mention him as if he were no longer here. Dan continues as he takes a bite of his skewer and looks at Josh, whose expression turns into a sad one. He was eaten by a monster. They were huge, bigger than a cow. 4 lifeless purple eyes in front of my eyes one night. We thought it was the wolves that killed all the animals, but it was that creature, that monster that murdered my grandfather, and it fled. Josh growled from the anger he was beginning to feel. His grandfather never got justice, a person who did not deserve to die. Josh clenched his fists in anger before continuing to speak. I want to finish that damn monster. I'm going to hunt him down. Doesn't matter if I die, but I'll take that disgusting creature to my grave. Josh spoke with more anger in his voice. It's okay if you don't believe me, but it's something I got to do no matter what. It's okay, Josh. I do believe you. Dan spoke as he looked at Josh, who looked at him with a noticeably surprised look. You know, you're not the only one who knows about the existence of these creatures. Dan continued with a small laugh, looking at the fire, releasing a nostalgic sigh. What? Really? You saw it too? Josh spoke, surprised to hear him say that. Well, no, I haven't met it face to face yet, but it's one of the creatures that have been talked about the most lately. It's the farm eater, right? You're one of the few who has seen her without being killed or seriously injured. He began to say and looked at the forest for a moment before continuing speaking. Now, I've been lucky enough to visit a tribe that praises that 4-eyed monster, since I've been out looking for her for looting local farms. But they don't talk about it much, but they realize I was a hunter. He spoke as he began to eat from his skewer. Please tell me everything you know. Let's hunt together. That's a cowardly monster. Didn't even dare hurt me when I saw her. Josh spoke quickly, looking for answers as to what the creature was and to end its life. Now calm down, boy. I don't just hunt animals. I hunt monsters. I started doing it years ago. I saw a lot in my time. Missing people, children, animals, encounters with the unknown. I'd heard and seen just about everything. And boy, you believe me when I tell you, you never trust yourself when one of those creatures lets you go. It's mere luck. Dan stared at Josh, letting him know that he didn't have to rush. Hunting the unknown could be dangerous if you don't know the objective. Dan told Josh that there was a group of hunters who also hunt monsters. They're like mercenaries. They're hired by people who have lived through or have seen unknown creatures, and these hunters are in charge of eliminating or capturing them. It depends on what the client asks for. And that creature, for the little that I could take from the tribe, her name is Kaeo. It's a creature that has not been living amongst us for a long time like the other monsters. It is a very hostile creature to any living being. Being close to her already is a danger. Perhaps you have already heard her legend. Most people think that she's a lonely wolf, but we don't believe that. Many have died for her, or will soon do. Dan said as he took out a small notebook with notes and passed it to Josh. Now that's the little I could get about Kaeo. You just can't go and set a trap and cut off her head like any other monster. She has an intelligence similar to or equal of that of a human. And so, you have to be very careful. Josh looked at Dan for a few seconds and then at the notebook. Dan supported him and invited him to also hunt monsters with him. The training was hard, but over the months he understood several things. He also learned to live better with his anger. If he let his emotions take control of him, there could be consequences, but not only did he improve his hunting techniques, he also improved as a person. Well, Josh, you've already learned a lot in this period of time, but it's time to hunt something big, Dan commented as they walked through the forest going up a small hill. Well, what do I have to do now, Dan? Josh asked as he walked behind him, observing the surroundings of the immense forest. Well, recently an unknown creature was seen near the lakes of this wood. There have already been some accidents. So you capture your first unknown creature to officially name yourself as a full-fledged hunter. Dan commented with a happy tone in his voice, until in the distance he saw something moving, making them stop. What's wrong, Dan? Did you see something? Aren't several animals in this area supposed to have left because of the creature? Josh commented, a little confused while looking at his teacher. Exactly. That thing is close. I can barely see it. The lake is not far away. I'm gonna draw the monster's attention. You go make a trap near the lake, he ordered Josh as he quickly went another way. Josh obeyed the order and ran towards the lake. As soon as he was in place, he began to take things out of his backpack and to prepare a trap to capture the creature. Once he was done, he hid behind some bushes and waited for the creature or for Dan's sign to appear. But the minutes passed, and there was no sign of either the monster or Dan. It was starting to worry Josh, until the sound of gunshots in the distance alerted him. Now Dan didn't tend to shoot at a target they had to capture, so the shots weren't any good. And without hesitation, Josh ran towards where the shots were heard, with his gun in hand to help him. He ran until he heard more gunshots and a scream, and Josh's heart began to race, feeling the worst. Until finally Josh arrived, and a feeling of deja vu hit him very hard when he saw what he had in front of his eyes. It was the creature, Kaeo, once again in front of him. She seemed agitated, her mouth was full of blood, and she looked everywhere without realizing Josh's presence yet. Josh's gaze quickly went down to Kaeo's paws. There was no body, but on its paws were blood, Dan's backpack, and the hat that he always wore. Feeling his heart skip a beat when he saw what had happened, he immediately thought about what he would do next. The creature they were looking for was actually Kaeo. Dan found it knowing how hungry the creature was. She didn't hesitate to attack and devour him. Dan had no chance against Kaeo alone and ended up dying, Josh thought. Josh tightened his grip on his gun and looked up at the creature. You're a horrible being. You're a monster, Josh shouted, immediately capturing Kae's attention. Kaeo turned and looked at him in confusion at his words. Kaeo seemed intent on approaching Josh, but Josh didn't hesitate for a moment to raise his gun at her. You're the worst. You took my grandfather. You destroyed my family, and now you took my teacher. I'm going to kill you, Josh shouted with a fury that was contained, firing towards Kaeo, but the bullets did not seem to have much effect on her. The creature seemed to be surprised by the human's words, looking at its paws with that hunter's clothes, and then looked at Josh, who continued shooting it. She slowly backed away from him and quickly turned around, fleeing the scene. Don't you flee, you damn coward. I swear I'll find you and I'll kill you, Josh finally shouted when he saw her flee, in the same way she did when Josh was a child. Josh finally broke down. He had lost everything. His grandfather, his family, his childhood, and his teacher. The last person that he could have considered family. The monster had taken everything. She snatched it away from him, but Josh wouldn't stop there. Now he was more than sure he would be the one to put an end to that creature. After Dan's funeral, the hunters and Josh had to make up an excuse for his death, since they obviously did not have his body, and they did not reveal the truth of his death to his family. Josh swore to them that he would take revenge, that he would find the murderer and kill it himself. He no longer had anybody else by his side. It was just him, his revenge, and the creature. And he would not rest until he destroys the Farm Eater.